All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you again for coming. I know this has been a seemingly long project, and you've all been fantastic in terms of your participation. We really couldn't do this without you. So this will be our third and last meeting for phase one of the development of the regional flood model. So we've got a packed agenda, which we'll get to momentarily, and lots of time for questions. So, you know, this is the first time for some of you seeing the viewer and you're taking a look at what's been done so far. So please have those questions ready, and we'll do our best to answer them. There will also be a post-meeting survey, and we hope that you will sort of think about what the discussion was today and get back to us with additional thoughts. So again, just want to thank all of you, our project partners. Special thanks to Jason for offering Dedham as the fiscal agent. We're looking forward to continuing to work with you. Fingers crossed that phase two gets funded, but we'll talk about that a little more later. And again, just to remind you, this was a really ambitious project with lots of different components. Today we're here to talk about the watershed-wide model portion of that. All right, and I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn it over to Andy.
Great. See if I can share mine. Screen.
Andrew, if you'd prefer. Okay, great.
And let me know when you can see it. You can see it? Yep.
Andy, we're just having the same audio problems a little bit with your headset. So just be aware of that.
It's a brand new headset too.
Oh, that's okay. Better. Whatever you just did made it better. So keep on.
I will hold it out in front of me for half an hour. I'm Andy Walker. I think I've met most of everybody here before, but technical leader at Weston Sampson, oversaw the development of the flood model. I'll speak just a couple minutes here about sort of recapping what we went over at meeting number 2, which was primarily how the model was developed and calibrated so that we could sort of have reliable results to incorporate into the viewer and to inform an evaluation of sort of how flooding in the watershed may change under future climate scenarios, as well as the efficacy of different sort of watershed-wide and site-specific mitigation scenarios. So I'll just dive into sort of a little bit of a recap just to remind people and help orient them. Based on some discussions that were had during flood meeting number 1, we focused in on a baseline or present day climate scenario, as well as the 2050 and 2070 time horizons. As in addition, we looked at 24-hour design storms and a couple of 48-hour design storms as well. And then, of course, there's always interest in some of the more recent historic, significant historic events also. And so we use those to help calibrate and validate the model. Here's just you've probably seen this before. It's been in past slides, but what you see here are basically the changes in the design rainfall depths for the different recurrence intervals, as well as the different time horizons. And the ones that are highlighted are the sort of model design events that were incorporated into the project. And you can see that in addition to trying to pair the same recurrence interval across multiple time horizons, right? So like the present day or the baseline 2-year, along with the 2070 2-year, pairing the 10 and the 10. We also tried to have a nice range of design rainfall depths, right? So there's not a whole lot of point in looking at a 3.8-inch event, because we're also looking at a 3.3 and a 4.5. So we tried to spread that as well. So the model results and the viewer sort of cover a wide range of rainfall and flood conditions. The last slide was focused on the 24, but we also evaluated, I'm sorry, the 24-hour events, but we also looked at a pair of 48-hour events as well, both the present day and the 2070 10-year. And just recap a little bit about model development as well, right? So the first piece of the first piece of the puzzle is identifying what design storms you want to look at, but then comes sort of the model development. The nearly 120 square mile watershed was broken up into thousands of individual subcatchments, and each one of those subcatchments was routed to a series of junctions and conduits that represent more than 150,000 linear feet along the Neponset River and nearly 600,000 linear feet along its tributaries. We also incorporated more than 800,000 linear feet of pipe and storm drains, thanks to the great GIS and input from the partner communities. Also in that model are dozens of dams and culvert and other road crossings. And then on top of that sort of skeleton of the model, we overlaid this really pretty dense 2D mesh. So the 2D mesh sits on top of all those conduits and junctions and subcatchments where the runoff is sort of generated. And then the 2D mesh, which is based on a whole range of data, including LIDAR and FEMA flood insurance studies and more. That 2D mesh sort of sits on top, and that's what helps move the water from upstream to downstream, and also what's responsible for identifying and sort of illustrating what areas are prone to flooding and at what depths. I won't take too long on this, but we went through a calibration and validation process, focusing on the March 2010 event in particular, so that we had some confidence that the simulated flooding results were sort of accurately reproducing historical flooding, and by and large that was true. And now I will dive into the model results, right? So last time we presented a lot of model results that were focused on how flooding, sort of what the flood prone areas are now under our present day climate, and then how that flooding may be expected to change or to increase under future climate scenarios. And here's just some examples of the type of output that we presented last time. And that is incorporated into the web viewer, which Johnny will sort of showcase later on in this presentation. Right, so this is the Dedham Manor neighborhood area, and on the left, this is baseline flooding, baseline climate, 10-year event, and on the right is the 10-year event, but in 2070. So you can see some increases not only in the extent of the flooding, but also in the depth of the flooding as the shades of blue darken in the image on the right. Here's a similar side by side. This is down at the Norwood Airport, and this is for the 100-year event. So on the left is the present day climate, or baseline climate, 100-year event. You can see the flooding extents, and then on the right, that's the 100-year event, but in 2070. So a more significant flood, and you can see again, not only increases in the flooding extents. You can see, for instance, it starts to encroach on the airstrip a little bit more, but also some significant increases in the depth of flooding. Here's a sort of a part tabular, part graphical summary of the anticipated increases due to a change in climate. Let me help get everyone oriented. Here is this column shows the acres of flooding, so the flooding extents. And this column here is sort of the volume of runoff coming off the land. So two different ways of looking at the land's response to rainfall events. And here you see we've made the comparison of different, sort of the same recurrence interval, but different time horizons. So the light blue is a present day or a baseline climate, and the darker blue is a 2070. So here we're comparing flooding extents and flood volumes for the 2-year storm, present day versus 2070. And you can see the area of flooding increases by about 9%. And for the 10-year 24-hour storm, that increase is 24%. So we're anticipating a 24% increase in acres of flooding as we move from baseline to a 2070 climate scenario. And we also made that comparison for the 10-year 48-hour storm. So that storm is longer in duration. Obviously, it drops more rainfall, but it's spread out over a longer time. So the peak intensity is a little bit less. And that was about a 12% increase in flooding extents over baseline. And then last, well, not last, but the 100-year storm events, so the most significant storm events we looked at. Right, so the increase is about 15% in inundated area. But note that that's an 80% increase in the amount of runoff being generated by the land, but that translates to a 15% increase in inundated area. And then, of course, we've also got the March 2010 storm event. So that should all be information that many of you have seen before. Sort of a quick look back at some of the work that was presented in flood modeling meeting number 2. And here's where we sort of dive into the new work, right? So this is all the work that's gone into sort of evaluating the potential flood reduction benefits of the watershed-wide solutions. And you may recall from past meetings that we have identified a number of different solutions, so 5 different solutions, right? So they're called 1A, 1B, 2, 3, and 4. And I'll speak more about them as we get in further into this section, but they were combined. Some of them were combined into scenarios, right? So scenario 1 consists of a combination of solution 1A and 1B. So that's really focused on green infrastructure and storing more water on site. Scenario 2 is a combination of 1A and 2 and 3. Right, so it's some green infrastructure, but then it's also wetland restoration and floodplain reconnection and some upland pond storage. And then finally, scenario 3 is a combination of the green infrastructure under 1A, but then also upland pond storage and land conservation in areas that are undeveloped and unprotected. So just put it up there, just to sort of orient us all. Particularly about the terminology, right? So these are individual solutions, and the scenarios consist of 2 or more of those solutions sort of incorporated together. So scenario 1 is focused on nature-based solutions modeled throughout the entire watershed. And you can see here, it assumes that 4.5 inches of runoff originating from 50% of the impervious cover across the watershed is captured and stored, right? So it's, if 50% of impervious surfaces in the watershed are retrofitted, and of those surfaces, 4.5 inches of runoff are captured. And then that's sort of 1A, and then solution 1B is focusing on the larger parcels. So capturing runoff and storing that on site for some of the larger parcels. And so we incorporated that into the model, and here are the results. Again, we're going to kind of report results both in terms of total inundated area, but also the total reduction in runoff from the watershed. So what you see here is 3 bars. The gray one is a baseline climate, no action. The blue one is a 2070 climate, no action. And so if you compare the blue bar to the gray bar, that's some of the same results we presented last time, and I just glanced over. And then what's really new here is the orange bar. So this is scenario 1, which again consists of solution 1A and 1B. And what this says is that the total inundated area would be expected to be about 4% less than if no action was taken. So in 2070, if scenario 1 was fully implemented by then it would reduce total inundated area by 4% compared to 2070 no action. But that still represents a 20% increase over baseline no action. So flooding is expected to get worse due to climate change, and this scenario offers a modest reduction on a watershed scale. The changes are more significant in terms of flood volume. So what total inundated area doesn't speak to necessarily is the depth of flooding and the severity of flooding. And that's why total runoff is important to consider, right? So if there's less runoff being generated by the land, you may still see similar extents in flooding, only a 4% reduction, but you do see a significant reduction of flood volumes, and that may translate to flood depths and sort of the severity of impacts. And so what you see is scenario 1 offers a 27% reduction when compared to 2070 no action in terms of total runoff, which is about a 45% increase over baseline no action. So still worse than baseline conditions, but significantly better than 2070 no action. Here's sort of a side-by-side highlighting some of, and you can find this type of output in the viewer, right? So on the left is this site. It's the same site in North Stoughton. On the left is the 2070 10-year event with no action, right? So like this brook, for instance, is shown to flood. And then as a result of scenario 1, that brook no longer floods significantly. So that's an improvement. You see something similar down here, this flooding here down near Stoughton Center. That flooding is shown to be sort of mitigated by this scenario. Scenario 2. So this scenario incorporates solution 1A, which is sort of those green and gray infrastructure storage projects, that sort of nature-based, but it's also coupled with increasing sort of wetlands storage, as well as the creation of upland storage projects. So what do we mean by that? The way the wetlands piece solution 2 was envisioned is that we increased the surface area of all wetlands across the watershed by 20%. So it's a 20% increase in in wetland surface area, and that an additional 1 foot of flooding was captured by those wetlands. And then the upland storage projects, many of you folks probably helped identify these projects, right? So in the last meeting, we went to some length to work with the communities to identify where flood storage might be created in your communities. Ultimately, we had a list of about 48 projects that were investigated. 30 of them were found to be feasible, and I should say feasible both from a constructability perspective, but also that it would produce a benefit, that it's in an area where additional flood storage would be of some help, and that this model was the right tool to evaluate that. So 48 projects, thank you for that. And 30 of them were incorporated into the model. The projects, these sort of upland storage projects that you helped identify and envision are of many different types, right? A lot of them are removing impoundments to lower flood levels. They might be creating new impoundments in areas where higher flood levels would have no impacts, but would protect more vulnerable downstream areas. Modifying impoundments, right, or actively managing impoundments, releasing water ahead of a storm to create additional storage. Reconnecting the Neponset or its tributaries with floodplain that may have become separated. Potentially creating a diversion, and also creating sort of floodable spaces, public spaces that are not needed every day of the year. All right, so this is just a screenshot of a spreadsheet we used to sort of that we in NEPR used to track the 48 different projects and some of their sort of criteria we looked at, and then sort of an estimate of the surface area and depth of storage that might be created. So all these projects sort of come, so that's solution 3. They were combined with solution 2, which was the wetlands, and then solution 1A, which is some of the GSI. Those were all incorporated into scenario 2, and these are the results. Again, we've got three sort of columns here. The first is baseline, no action. Obviously, there's an increase in flooding extents, sort of under 2070 climate conditions. And then the orange column is the results of scenario 2. So it's a 14% reduction, pretty significant reduction from 2070 no action. And while it doesn't sort of fully mitigate the impacts of climate change in terms of flooded area, it does quite well. Scenario 2 is associated with flooding extents that are only about 7% greater than baseline no action. So some real positives there. We also see a similar story in terms of total runoff. I think the volume of runoff is nearly doubled moving from baseline to 2070, but scenario 2 offers a 41% reduction in runoff volume. So significantly less volume equals significantly less flooding depths and potentially impacts. And it continues to be about 19% higher than baseline no action, but a significant benefit here. Here's just sort of zooming in. Again, this is on the viewer, but zooming in, you can see some of those areas. This is an example from East Walpole. You can see the flooding extents here are greater than under scenario 2, right? So on the left is 2070 no action, on the right is scenario 2. So not only are we reducing flooding here and here, but like I keep alluding to, we're also reducing the depths of flooding. So this is a totally different part of the watershed. But what you see here are, so the blue is what is being flooded under 2070, the 2070 10-year scenario 2. The red polygons you see poking out are 2070 no action. So not only are we seeing greater flooding extents, or I'm sorry, reduced flooding extents associated with scenario 2, we're also seeing a significant reduction in the maximum flood depth, right? So this particular 2D cell, under no action conditions, floods to an average depth of 2.85 feet. Under scenario 2, the depth of flooding is 1.43 feet, so significant, nearly half. So that may be a significant benefit to this plot of land. And so all this information is in the viewer. You can click any 2D cell for any of the model runs and look at the average flood depth. And Indrani will sort of give a more robust tour of the viewer in a few minutes. Scenario 3. Scenario 3 incorporated some of the green and gray infrastructure storage projects from Solution 1A, but that was also coupled with increased storage from undeveloped and unprotected parcels, which consists or comprises Solution 4. Again, Solution 1A is storing 4.5 inches of runoff from half of the impervious cover in the watershed. But what's new here is Solution 4. And so this is undeveloped and unprotected land, assuming that it is developed. And then, of course, meeting mass stormwater regs, the development cannot result in the increase of flooding downstream. However, Solution 4 kind of goes above and beyond that and looks at, right, this is an opportunity. If the land is being developed, can we require additional flood storage above and beyond the Massachusetts stormwater regs? And so what DEP has recommended is that communities can require or emphasize increasing storage above and beyond, right? So it's the idea, instead of ensuring that your development project doesn't increase flooding during a rain event, as defined by the, right, if you haven't been to the NOAA 14 website, check it out. But the NOAA 14 website provides the median rainfall depth associated with a given storm. And you may not notice, but it also provides the 90% confidence interval. So sort of a lower bound and an upper bound of what depth of rain is likely to fall during that particular storm event. And so what DEP recommends but does not require is that you take the upper bound. You take 90% of the upper bound and you use that value instead of the median. And so I believe we did a poll during meeting number 2, asking you folks if we should use that approach or a different approach to increase flood storage and potentially develop lands that's being used in some studies in Cambridge. I believe you selected this approach on a 5-3 vote, if I recall. And when we did some preliminary modeling of this, we found that the benefit was underwhelming. That what it translated to was creating on average 0.1 inches of flood storage across the watershed, so not a significant amount. And so instead of taking 90% of that upper bound of a 90% confidence interval, we took the upper bound itself. And so what that translated to was 1.3 inches of additional flood storage on that undeveloped, unprotected land. So it's a change from what we sort of said we were going to do in meeting number 2. So I just wanted to highlight that. And again, the reasoning is preliminary modeling suggested it was going to be underwhelming. So we increased it a little bit to show more of a benefit. And these are the results, right? So again, total inundated area increase moving from baseline to 2070, no action. Scenario 3 would result in a 4% reduction in total inundated area compared to 2070, no action. It would still be about 20% greater than baseline, no action. The changes in total runoff are definitely more significant and promising. The total runoff volume would be reduced by about 24% when compared to 2070, no action, but it would still be about 50%, 52% greater than baseline, no action. Here's a particular area in near Route 1 in Westwood that would experience a noteworthy benefit. You can see some significant flooding here on the turnpike that would be largely eliminated by the scenario 3 that was incorporated into the model. You also see some reduced flooding extents and depths here as well near the cemetery. So these are some of the results, some of the ways of looking at the model results for the 3 watershed-wide mitigation scenarios that were evaluated as part of this project. In addition, this model can be used to evaluate projects on a townwide or a neighborhood-wide scale. And that's exactly what was done with Dedham's Manor neighborhood. This is sort of a pilot project on using this model sort of in a zoomed in, a smaller area. The Manor neighborhood has had some flooding issues. And so the model was used to evaluate some potential sort of individual projects or a collection of a couple of individual projects in this area. They looked at 3 different sort of scenarios. The first was actually the same thing as the watershed-wide scenario 1. They wanted to sort of zoom in and see the potential benefits on a smaller scale. So the 2D cells in this neighborhood were refined and are much smaller, so that we could look at the potential benefits of scenario 1 at a finer scale. Manor neighborhood scenario 2M, you'll find that connotation in the viewer. The watershed-wide scenarios are simply 1, 2, 3. And if you see 2M or 3M, that refers to the Manor neighborhood ones. But scenario 2 was sort of preventing backflow through flat gates or other structures at some of the outfalls where runoff is discharged from the Manor neighborhood. And then scenario 3, Manor neighborhood scenario 3, looked at some upland storage opportunities near the Blue Hills Adult Education Center and on the Stryer property. So I won't go into sort of the details of the results. I think those were presented just last week in a meeting for Dedham. But hopefully, based on the last few slides, you've started to get a taste for how the model can be used to evaluate some watershed-wide mitigation strategies and sort of the effectiveness of some of the ones that we looked at. And you've seen some screenshots from the web viewer, and I think Indrani is up next to sort of give you a detailed walkthrough of that web viewer.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was great. That you covered a tremendous amount of information in a limited period of time. I will go ahead and share my screen here. And as we pull up the viewer, and share that and share my screen. Look at the viewer here, situate the windows. I want to just let you all know that it's not currently, it's not accessible by all. We are working hard to make this link live and open to the public. So you all can access it. I believe the username and password and the login credentials for the viewer was shared at the last meeting. But as you all are looking at these results hot off the press as we speak, so we are still working on making the viewer amenable to you all viewing the results. So as a result of that, we've kept it still password protected because we're in active development phase. But we will be working to make this link live and public so you can access it easily without the password credentials. And we're hoping to do that by early next week. So for now, that the link that that Andy shared on the previous slide is the link to the viewer. You can click the link and you're going to get into something that looks like this. I just have two instances of the same thing open. So this shows the model, the boundary of the Neponset River watershed. And these are the different widgets on the top and I'll walk you through each of these widgets one by one. The first one here are the base layers. As you can see, that's pretty easy to understand. It includes all the 15 communities that you all represent in this watershed, also includes the streams and ponds, which correspond to our hydro. So you can turn those on to see how those are included. And then we move on to the watershed attributes widget. This, a lot of the results that Andy covered in the presentation those were site specific as well as at the watershed scale. However, we will, for you all to better understand how the different scenarios that we've modeled, what the flood reduction benefits are, as well as what the flood increases are, we will be summarizing those results at the scale of these subbasins. And these are, I believe, the 20 or so subbasins that we have that we will be using to summarize the results, which are labeled here. So right now, the viewer doesn't have those summary subbasin results, the results at the subbasin scale, but we will have that available in one of the widgets, and I'll walk you through that. But I just wanted to give that as a preview. In addition to that, it also includes all the model conduits that Andy mentioned that have been included in the viewer that have been included in the model, which include the open channels and the pipes, the open, the drainage network that you all have provided. So this is a helpful tab for you all, or a link for you all to go back to see what was included in the model, or what is included here in this. There, it also shows the model junctions that have been factored in, as well as the model subcatchments, which are, the model has been discretized for the purpose of modeling into various smaller areas. I will not go into the details of that, but it's a very high, it's relatively high resolution model that factors in all of those sub areas. So that information is also included, as well as all the dams in the watershed that have been included in the model are also included in the viewer for you to have a better understanding of the extents of the model domain. So that's all included in this watershed attributes widget. We then move on to some additional information related to flooding that you all provided to us, and we've collected from a variety of sources, which was also used as part of the model development, model calibration. One of them are the flood locations from the March 2010 flooding, which we've used as part of our calibration efforts that Andy had covered in the last meeting. In addition to that, we have other flooding locations that were provided through public input. We've factored in the flood locations from other flood hazard areas that we've compiled through hazard mitigation plans of all the different communities that you represent, along with the additional information that MAPC provided as part of this project. So all of this information is compiled here and provided in this tab for you all to look at. So that's related to the historic flooded areas. The other categories in this particular widget are the FEMA flood hazard layer. So you can turn that on and you'll see all of the FEMA, the 100 and the different national flood hazard layer legends are here for consistency. We've kept it the same. And then in some parts of the watershed where the NFHL data is not available, the Q3 data is used, such as in Canton. So that information can be helpful for you all to access as you look at the model results and compare that as a check with FEMA. There are two very different types of models. So a direct comparison as such is not warranted, but it's is a reference. And then the other component that's included here, which is sort of peripherally used for this phase, but will be used further in the subsequent phase, are the coastal flood modeling layers. These are the ones that have been adopted and used by the state as part of the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model. As you can see, only smaller portions of the lower watershed are affected. This shows the extent of flooding from sea level rise and storm surge by 2070. Again, those are included here as a reference for this particular project. We're really focusing on precipitation-driven flood modeling. So that's the coverage for the additional flooded areas. I'll close that widget. Then this is where we have all the flood results for the no action scenarios that we had covered in the last round, as well as what Andy touched upon in the beginning of this meeting. So this entire widget is focusing on flood model results with no action scenarios. And as you can see, we've broken it up by the different return periods. So the first sort of block here is the 2-year storms. All of these 2-year storms are the 24-hour duration storms. We've also added in the calibration event, the 10-year storms and the 100-year storms. All of these no action scenarios have been run for baseline in 2070. We've run some for 2050 because we've matched the amounts. So if we turn on, this is the 2-year baseline and the comparison of the 2-year 2070. I will actually do this comparison with the 10-year because that's really the storm that we've used the most. So if I toggle off if I toggle on and off the 2070 10-year storm, just as a reminder, this is about 7.1 inches of rain over 24 hours. And the present day 10-year is about 5.1 inches. So, we're talking about 2 inches more of rain. And you see a lot of the flooding, if you zoom in, also getting more expansive and more extensive, as well as more deep in the future scenarios. So you can do this at a scale. You could also turn your slider on. So that's a slider feature we have included in the viewer. So that would help you compare the scenarios by turning on the swipe feature to show which areas see more flooding. So you could do that at any scale within your community. You could also query the numbers by depth, as Andy was covering. So what we see here is the max depth of flooding here is 2.3 feet. And that's for, we'll make sure we have these scenarios labeled, but you can then you can check this by the different scenarios. So once you have the baseline turned on, the 10-year depth at this location corresponds to 2.03. You can turn that off and you can turn it on, turn the other one back, and it's going to tell you it had increased to 2.3 feet. So you know, we still have, this is work in progress on the viewer, but it lets you query the different scenarios, and you can look at the max water surface elevation and the max depth. Those would be really the two fields that we would encourage you to look at. And then similarly, you have the baseline 100-year and the 2070 100-year. You can zoom in and zoom out, and you'll see a lot of exacerbation of flooding. We're talking about 11.1 inches of rain. We go the other way, you see the worsening of flooding in lots of areas, which corresponds to about 11 inches of rain in 24 hours compared to 8 inches of rain in 24 hours under present conditions. So those are all the no action scenarios. And then this last widget that we have is related to the nature-based solution scenarios that we covered. We're calling that as NBS, stands for nature-based solutions. And it shows the different scenarios that we looked at. So if we turn on, if we want to see the results of the 2070 scenario, 2070 10-year for scenario 1, which was a combination. And I have that slide open just so we can remind everyone what that is. As Andy just mentioned, it has the 4.5 inches of rain, storing that, which from 50% of impervious cover, as well as for larger parcels greater than 1 acre, storing the difference between the 2070 25-year and the 2070 2-year storm, which was a requirement, which is a stringent requirement that we're modeling from the city of Cambridge. So if we do that, if we use that, these are some of the benefits that we see. And to look at the benefits, you'd have to go back. So you have this under the nature-based solutions, and you go in here and you turn on 2070 10, and you could do a slider to show the results, to show the benefits of the scenarios, or you could turn it off and on to see where the benefits are. So we'll leave the baseline 2070 10-year on. We go back to the nature-based solution widget, and we see what the benefits are for the 2-year storm that we were, for scenario 2. So scenario 2 is where we are doing the combination of green infrastructure plus 2 and 3, which is the wetland increase on the wetland area, as well as the upland pond storage, increasing the depth by additional 3 to 5 feet in upland locations based on the locations that you all provided. And if we look at that, we can see a similar comparison in terms of reduction in flooding. I believe for scenario 2, I think East Walpole showed some improvement. And we will, to make this easier, we will create some of these bookmarks to help you show the effect. You can also, the slider is also a good feature to show that benefit. We have done all of these comparisons. As you can see here, this part of Sharon also shows some benefit with the increase in the wetland area and addition of green infrastructure plus upland storage. And then finally, scenario 3, again, we leave the base layer on, which is the 2070 10-year, and we turn on this one here, scenario 3. And I think Westwood, the Route 1 area of Westwood saw some good improvement. So we can find that also we could just turn things off and on to see where the benefits are. So left is the scenario, right is the no action. And you can do that for any of your locations. We'll create some bookmark locations to help you get to the, or you could do it as well as you start using the viewer more and more. Yeah, so we see some significant benefits here as well. And then last but not the least, we have the manor results also included. I'll turn the slider off. We've bookmarked that because that's definitely an area that we've looked at, and the scenarios that have already been presented in the prior meeting are also included here as a reference. So those were really all the widgets that we had to cover on the viewer. I think we are at time here for questions. So we can keep this screen on. We can go to the PowerPoint. We can not share anything. We'll take your cue on how best to go over questions and answers.
Yeah, so anybody who has a question, you can raise your hand using the raise hand icon down the bottom. You can enter it into the chat. Since we don't have a line, you can just unmute yourself and start talking. Ian.
I actually had a comment, which was just to remind people that since the viewer isn't truly public yet, you can log into it with the information we gave you, but be a little careful if you do that, because in theory that login account would give you the ability to delete something or change something, which obviously we don't want to do. So just reminding people to be thoughtful, which I'm sure they would be.
Thanks, Ian.
Hello, Brett
Hey, Rob.
Stevens with the city of Quincy. Ian, we got to be careful with this information, because why? We're actually showing flooding on private property. And if it gets out in the public, there could be concerns. I have concerns because of that myself. So this gets us, the group, sort of ahead of land use, current land use regulations. Is that a fair statement? We all typically rely on FEMA flood zones. So now we've got new information. I don't know how many people are familiar. There was a recent Texas Homeowner Association ruling. I think it was Starwood, that put liability on the design engineer and the review engineers for flooding that had resulted in a development. Does this viewer start, the group down of communities down this path of getting ourselves over or beyond FEMA's current regulations? Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
So I am not familiar with the Starwood decision. I'll have to take a look at that. But this viewer, my understanding is this viewer does not impact FEMA flood zones and the requirements that go along with that. FEMA is backwards looking. They look at what where flooding has been in the past versus future projections. So this is not, it's also at a watershed wide scale, which is not as detailed as a lot of what FEMA uses. So those are my only comments to that from what I know, but I will look up the Starwood decision.
I'll second that, Carrie. This is a sort of a planning level tool, a powerful one at that, but a planning level tool. FEMA's models cost on the order, an order of magnitude more to develop because it involves extensive field survey, cross sections across the river, the Neponset distributary. It's a much larger model and a much larger modeling effort. This is really to help the communities understand sort of areas that are at risk for flooding, both now, but also under future climate scenarios, and then how effective different types of mitigation strategies are at sort of pushing back on that.
And again, there are limitations of the FEMA approach, which we are addressing with this project in terms of the backwards looking. FEMA does not factor in drainage piped infrastructure. This is still a planning level model. As Andy and Carrie mentioned, we are using best available information that the state has provided in terms of future climate projections. As you know, the RMAT tool, the Climate Resilience Design Standards tool, is a recommended tool for all recommended public and private entities can choose to use that too. So it's using the information that's coming through RMAT, which the state has embraced and recommended. And we're translating that information in terms of what it means for rainfall depths to what it means in terms of extensive flooding at the watershed scale using this planning level model.
Maybe one other minor point I would add is we have no plans, and I assume that the towns have no plans, and particularly us being the advocacy organization in the room, have no plans to like submit this to FEMA and tell them to adopt it or anything. And it is, I suspect the case in Texas is maybe, and maybe you can clarify, is a situation where something was built, flooding occurred, and then somebody was in trouble for a flood that was bigger than they had imagined, causing a problem. Where this is a very different kind of thing, where it's it's limited in its ability to see the future and the assumptions that are built into it, but at least starts to give people some ideas where there might be problems, some possibilities of things that we might be able to do to avoid some of those problems. But it's pretty speculative.
So in Quincy, we have our own flood inundation modeling that's been coming online. And we had a situation where we had a large development, 80 units, that was proposed, but it was just outside the FEMA flood zone. We spent time with that design engineer and that proponent to convince them to design the foundation as though it was in the floodplain. They did it voluntarily. There was nothing we could do to compel them to do that. I feel as though current land use practices are not currently geared to be able to manage these new flood inundation modeling that's coming online. And as a municipality, I have a lot of concerns about this information, particularly when it implicates private landowners. We're probably going to hear about it from a number of them. So that's just some of my real world experiences. Another comment overall on the modeling is I know it's focused on one storm. My experiences here, I go back to that blizzard winter. If we all recall, there was 3 blizzards 2 weeks apart. I think, I don't think we can, it took us so long to just get it to this original model, but I think there should be some kind of discussion on weather patterns that tend to set up, for maybe 4 to 6 week stretches. And what would the cumulative of like 3 nor'easters in a month's time be to our area? That seems to be where, we haven't dried out or drained out and the next storm's coming along. That seems to be what's been happening. I think those March of 2018 storms was a series of nor'easters as well. So I'm just not picking some of that up in the planning stuff.
Great point, Rob. Certainly those are good ideas for future phases of modeling, is to try an even wider range of storm conditions, back-to-back storms. Right? I will say the one of the reasons we opted to do the 48-hour events is because it also it's sort of a stress test of the watershed and its waterways, because it drops a greater volume of runoff with maybe a lower peak intensity. And I think it was decided somewhere along the line that to minimize the number of model simulations, because they take an incredibly long amount of time. But the minimize the number of simulations, that there was enough overlap between the way that a 48-hour design storm stressed the watershed as back-to-back storms would. But I think you're absolutely right. Being able to explore different types of hydrologic stressors could be of value in future phases of modeling for sure.
Holly entered a comment in the chat. I just contribute that from my perspective, what can be destroyed by truth should be, if the concern is about discouraging development or reducing property values in places where there's likely to be flooding. And certainly one of the things we hope to do is work with cities and towns to sort of educate them and help them figure out how to update those land use regulations to be more forward thinking than backwards. Any other questions or comments? about the model?
Could I ask a question? Because one of the things we talked about a fair amount, kind of as we were working with these guys to try to finish this and get ready, would you just talk a little bit about the limitations of the model, and a sort of like a sense of what are appropriate uses? Because like, we had talked about like, well, could this model be used for a town to like update its zoning to like create flood areas that are, more inclusive than FEMA? Like, is this model good enough to do that? Or, or maybe talk about areas that are sort of outside of the mesh and kind of how to think about what's shown there or not shown there.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So we sort of alluded to this, the easiest use, I won't say best, but the most natural use of the model is a planning level tool. It's quite good at evaluating sort of generally areas of future flood risk compared to present day. And it's quite good at looking at the sort of the relative benefit of different flood mitigation strategies, particularly watershed wide ones. The more you zoom in, right? So there's a huge balancing act in developing this and models like it, trying to add as much detail as possible without creating this beast of a model that takes a week to run, and being able to get output out of it in a useful time frame so that it can be useful to the communities within the watershed. So this is very much a balancing act. But so this is sort of the first phase of work. So the initial model has an incredible level of detail, tens of thousands of 2D cells that can flood or not, and each one has a different flood depth associated with, so an incredible amount of output in the model, but definitely sort of developed with a watershed scale in mind. And then as sort of an example, as sort of a pilot project, we've zoomed in on the Manor neighborhood, for instance, and added additional detail there. So, instead of modeling 18-inch storm drains or larger, modeling some of the smaller storm drains there, refining the 2D mesh there. So instead of 2D cells being, 100 feet across, maybe they're 20 feet across. So this watershed wide model can certainly be added to and sort of modified to have more detail in individual areas. And it can be parts of the watershed can be broken out, right? So if a particular community wanted quite a lot more detail, with regard to sort of flooding extents and incorporating more of their drainage network, that can be broken out, and you can create a sub model, and all that additional detail can go into the sub model. So it doesn't, adding all that extra information doesn't have to take weeks to simulate because it's in sort of a smaller subsection of the model. So we do that as well. This model, this watershed wide model is an excellent start. A lot of useful output, but certainly individual communities can zoom in to just so that their corporate limits or to problem neighborhoods or even specific intersections, and the model can be adapted with additional detail to look at sort of neighborhood, town-wide or neighborhood-wide or site-specific scale concepts.
And I will add on to that as other best practices that other places are using this type of model for, not this model, but this type of model for example, we know the cities of Boston and Cambridge, Boston Water and Sewer Commission. I see Hannah, you're here today from Boston. You have your own models that you've been updating your infrastructure details with, using that model to inform decisions related to design as well as planning and early design decisions. City of Cambridge is using the model to inform private development. They have a recommendation of build protect to the 2070 10-year from their flood viewer and recover from the 2070 100-year also from their flood viewer. So as we refine the flood model, add in more details from the communities, and build upon, again, this is the first brush. We had no information at the watershed scale to begin with. So, this is definitely a good first step forward. And as this model gets refined and updated and becomes a living document, as we speak, we can use it to make more informed decisions on planning and early design.
Any other questions before we move on? All right. Well, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. You can follow up with us via email as well. But for now, I will turn the floor over to Jenny.
Great, thanks, Carrie. All right. So we're going to wrap up the technical session today with talking about how we're thinking about prioritizing all of the solutions for the watershed. So this is the watershed-wide solutions that Andy talked about in great detail, as well as moving forward to a next phase and starting to think about individual site-specific solutions that a community may want to pursue. Apologize, we did the wrong thing. Okay. So we're just going to do this with a Slido exercise. There's a QR code here. You can scan it to join, or you can go to slido.com. You can sign in to with the password #NEPRA. You can also respond in the chat if this is just kind of a pain for you. So feel free to just respond in the chat. But it's nice to see everybody kind of vote together. And I will encourage everyone participating to vote today, not just communities. So thank you. So we want to look at not only flood reduction, but also social and economic factors in thinking about how the strategies discussed can benefit communities. The other watersheds that have been doing watershed-wide studies for years, including the Mystic and Charles, have been doing this approach. And as I mentioned, we're going to be really thinking about sort of how do they factor into the watershed-wide solutions that we've presented now, which were the 3 scenarios, but also individual projects that are in the future. So some examples here from the Mystic River Watershed Association work. They looked at how priorities can be site-specific, so considering hydrology, cost needs of implementation, acceptance by the public, how they benefit environmental justice communities and promote equity, and connect to the actual Mystic River and open spaces. There's a whole weighting criteria that can be completed. And these are sort of ideas for next phase of work, which Carrie's going to wrap up with at the end, but we did want to cover these ideas, right? So thinking about not just local benefit to flood reduction, but regional benefit, how ready a community might be to actually do the work. Again, the equity factor, and also adding in ecosystem habitat restoration potential as a piece of the puzzle. In the Charles River watershed, the modeling has looked at watershed-wide solutions as well as a number of site-specific projects with a tiered solutions rating, right? So thinking about a first tier, is it feasible? How does it do for flood reduction? How much support is there? And then tier 2 really honing in on those co-benefits about biodiversity, recreation. Is it permittable? Is it feasible? And what are those regional co-benefits? Also, the Charles is looking at not just site-specific projects, but what we call subbasins, or Andy, you might have used a different word, but in your presentation, Indrani, excuse me, you presented in the viewer all of the different little subcatchments. We can look on like a subcatchment.
Subbasins is great. Yep.
Yep, subbasin level. So thinking about how those, all you can do in that subbasin and how it works and interrelates with upstream and downstream subbasins. So this just gives you a sense of what's going on in the other watersheds and how they're ranking and prioritizing their projects. So we're proposing prioritization criteria for the Neponset based on the work in other watersheds that include these categories. So flood reduction from the modeling, cost effectiveness, maintenance effort and frequency, feasibility, co-benefits, which I'm going to get to in a second. Is it fundable? Promoting equity and community support. There are 2 of these categories that, you can delve into details with all these categories, but co-benefits and equity in particular have a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. I think you are all familiar with co-benefits. It's basically, what else would this project do besides reduce flooding? Flooding. Will it, make it a nicer public park? Will it provide trees and reduce air temperatures, etc.? And equity, there's a lot of different ways to slice the puzzle. So we were hoping to get some input from folks on co-benefits and equity. So this is a long list. If you go to the Slido, hopefully folks will do this. And I can't see the chat. So Andy or Indrani, or Carrie, please, interrupt me if folks are responding in the chat. Somebody let me know if this is working too.
Yep, I'm in
It's
it.
working for me. Yep.
Oh, good. So what co-benefits do you consider to be the most important from your perspective? And you can rank, I believe, all of these, but you could also pick your top few. Do you like to see projects that reduce localized temperatures? Do you like to see improved water quality? Should project increase groundwater recharge and help with base flows back to the river? Improve air quality locally for your community? Improve biodiversity and add pollinators to the community? Sequester carbon? Oh, now it's jumping around because people are voting. That's great. Improving public health, quality of life is important to you. Does this project create recreation, education, or gathering space? Does it save energy, increase property values? See, 6 people have voted. And our winner right now so far is improve public health, quality of life, with some second listings here: reducing local temperatures, water quality, groundwater recharge, improving air quality. We have 8 votes. Give it
And
one
again,
more.
if Slido isn't working, just put your top couple choices in the chat.
9 votes. I mean, certainly we all want to improve public health and quality of life. So it seems like a clear winner here. But these are certainly pieces of the puzzle for ranking these solutions moving forward. 10. Okay. Should I give it one more second? Carrie, how are we for time?
We're good.
11. All right. Hey, people are doing this. This is great. All right. Well, with that, we will take this into consideration as we move forward with this phase of the project and future phases. Gonna move on. For thinking about rating equity, one of the metrics we've used in other watersheds is looking at, is a project physically proximate to an environmental justice population? So that would be a population defined by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts related to language and income, et cetera. Or is the project likely to benefit the population? For example, the park that you're doing stormwater or flood reduction improvements or a whole, greenscaping process to, isn't in the EJ community, but it's used by the EJ community. There's also what's now called priority populations by EEA, and these previously were the word terminology was vulnerable population, but basically it's a population that may be impacted by climate change more excessively or heavily than other populations. That might be seniors or youth or certain communities with disabilities, et cetera. So, and then we also wanted to consider, do you want to have projects where there's specific support from environmental justice or priority populations? And if anyone has another category considering for equity that you want us to consider for equity, be great if you could vote and put it in the chat. If not, no problem. Got 8 responses, seeing a lot about likelihood a project will benefit a priority population. I think that's a really logical test. Definitely a piece that would require more than, a GIS exercise to come up with that. You'd have to actually get input specifically from the community to make sure that there's a belief that that would work. Okay, we have a tie, so we want to consider environmental justice and priority populations. Great. Well, 12 votes. I think that's our total, right? All right, we'll move on. I'm sorry.
If you've talked to my dear friend Chris Sturgeon, and
He's all excited about it.
he's
He's jumping out of his boots.
Oh, okay. All right. Are there any additional prioritization criteria that you want us to add? So we have a number of factors that we had covered, right? So we have, sorry, I'm trying to look at the full list here. I don't know if you guys can see my screen. Flood reduction from the model, cost effectiveness, maintenance effort and frequency, actual feasibility, the co-benefits, whether it's fundable or not, promoting equity and community support. It's okay if nobody has an answer. Oh, I see some typing.
Virginia, are we supposed to be able to see something to,
Oh, did it stop sharing?
all we can see is the question at the top. Are there additional prioritization criteria?
Yeah, I
Nope.
think the responses will show, right, once they're finished typing.
This is just an open answer question. So I see maintenance is really important. Absolutely, we consider maintenance effort and the frequency. So whether you can do a project with in-house capabilities or whether it would require contracting seems to be a very common prioritization item. Cost effectiveness, absolutely. Native species requirement. Oh, that's a new one that's not on our list. See some comments about waiting between preserving open space and high value conservation areas versus retrofits. Great. So there are definitely some new ones in here for us to think about and consider as the project moves forward. So thanks everyone for providing that input.
And Jenny, Holly just wanted to point out that this ties in really well with MEPC's current project to develop a BMP siting tool that incorporates EJ and equity.
Oh, great. Is that tool something that will be shared with this group at some point?
It is a public project, so I know it will be available. I'm not sure when it is done. I don't know if it's the end of the fiscal year or.
It is a DEP MS4 grant, which those who know that means it's June 30th. And we'll be looking for opportunities to share it with this group because the tool was originally an earlier version of it done with the Neponset Watershed Association. We're doing sort of a 2.0 version of it that incorporates EJ into it as well. And we've just been invited to present it at the MACC statewide conference in October. So we're going to be looking for lots of, once it's out and ready to roll, which is soon, we'll be looking for chances to put it in people's hands.
Great, thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Martin.
All right, so the last two questions. So out of the criteria that we covered, what is most important to you? So you should be able to rank these in order of importance. So flood reduction from the model, cost effectiveness, maintenance effort, frequency, feasibility, all the co-benefits we discussed. Again, acknowledging there are many co-benefits and we would, sort that out in the next phase of work. Is it fundable? Does it promote equity? And how much community support is there? See some folks ranking. Someday I would like to be in a meeting where I get to do the Slido. Oh, cost effectiveness has come out on top so far. We got 2 folks. Community support second. Feasibility, we got a lot of engineers on this meeting, huh? Okay, feasibility, cost effectiveness, flood reduction. Oh, flood reduction first now. But still feasibility and cost effectiveness towards the top. Interesting, community support dropped to 6th. Got 12 folks. All right, great. I think that's everyone. So flood reduction and feasibility are tied with cost effectiveness and co-benefits, and then sliding down the scale. But great. 13 flood reduction. Kicked it. Okay. There's a last sort of wordle. Why did you pick the top priority? Why is it most important to you? And what it will do is a word cloud will appear here with some of the terms that folks are typing. So you can type a sentence in, you can type a word in. Carrie, I'll be curious to see how this one results. Mm. Mm. Taxes, yeah, feel that. Thinking about sustainability has really come up in other projects. Thinking about the compounding benefits of these projects. Being practical, having community supported work, reducing risk to property owners and the public, and environmental justice populations. So equity and sustainability sort of hopped up. I think we have 10 respondents. I think that's pretty good. So this was our last question. So Carrie, in the interest of time, I'm gonna continue on and let you talk about your last stuff.
Great. All right. So next steps and action items. Next slide. We've got a couple of things I want to address. Next slide, Jenny. So first, phase 2, yay. So you've all received, or all the towns have received a copy of the application that we submitted with all of you for a 2-year MVP action grant over FY24 and FY25. And we hope to address a number of things, including refining the flood model, using it to sort of evaluate risks to critical infrastructure, take a closer look at some sub basins. We also want to advance the work that you've all done on the climate collaborative framework, and go visit each town, do some in-reach meetings with your boards of selectmen, your select boards, and sort of get together a steering committee to really come up with the governing body and really start trying to come up with an implementation plan for some of the priorities that you've already identified. We also want to organize a community advisory group with significant environmental justice and priority population representation to make sure that that we know, we're incorporating all of the community priorities in addition to sort of what we know or what we believe would be feasible, and just make sure that we keep that equity in mind. We want to engage in some general education just to expand the capacity of the public to really advocate for some of these projects and understand what adaptation opportunities are available, rather than simply talking about what the climate impacts are going to be, which I think a lot of people already talk about, but I think there's a lack of knowledge about what people can do. And then we'd like to do another round of technical assistance and really drill down into any policy updates that towns are interested in, and really provide some hands-on assistance to do that. So it's, again, an ambitious project. We did it over 2 years and I'm really excited about it. So fingers crossed, and we will let you know when we finally hear. Next slide. We would love for all of you to help us promote the final public meeting on June 15th. It's a virtual meeting. You can register at neponset.org/climate-adapt or climate meeting. That QR code will take you there. We have advertised on all of the local cable stations. There are physical flyers in public buildings. We're using social media. And we've asked each of the towns to publicize it through your own networks and share it with all of your town boards. So we'd appreciate it if you continue to do that up until the meeting. Next slide. And finally, we really need everybody to update their in-kind match. Sorry, I apologize for the ambulance going by. So if you go use this link, I've just included it in the chat. That will take you to the spreadsheet that we have created to track all of your in-kind work. You all, provided a letter of commitment with a certain number of, with a certain amount of in-kind time. I've been able to capture a lot of it based on your attendance at meetings, but I know there are things that you've been doing outside of the meetings that you can capture. It's really important that we actually fulfill the commitment. I don't want anybody to owe cash in lieu of the in-kind. So if all of you could go to this link, again, I've tried to update it as best I can, but I know I'm missing stuff. The first worksheet you'll see is a summary, and you can see what your town promised and what has been reported so far. And then there are individual sheets for each town. And if I'm missing an employee, anything, please add that in. And if you have any questions, please just reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through it. And that is going to be it for us. Does anybody have any final questions?